I want to talk briefly about the difference between good and great design. Now, in a word, I would call it collaboration. Uh, but commonly, businesses hire product designers, maybe UX designers, and they drop them into an existing company way of working or product team way of working. Now, there is some optimization you can do to make collaboration work across those departments, across those roles that really get the most out of product and the most out of product design. And I'm going to use the Triple Diamond framework here to talk that through in a little more detail. This is something I came up with a few years ago based on the Double Diamond, so you might be quite familiar with it. One thing to point out is this last section, which is around shaping. So after you've gone through your discovery and ideation, you'll end up with a proof of concept. Now, getting that proof of concept to a viable, releasable MVP, and then knowing what comes after that and how you measure it is also a really important part of delivering product, and that's why I'm going to use the Triple Diamond here. Now, going right back to the beginning here, we can see that under discovery, we've also got this section called prep at the beginning, or strategy it could be called. And here, one important stage is to compare the business needs and the user needs. So if you think about it like a Venn diagram where they cross over and both the business and users want the same thing, they're the easy wins. That's a given, and anyone can come up with those solutions, those ideas, those pain points if they do the research. The tricky part comes in things that sometimes sit in the business needs and sit in only the user needs, and they don't cross over in the middle of that Venn diagram. So getting on the same page, collaborating, discussing, and being very close as a team to those decisions and that discussion really helps make the decisions around what compromises are we going to make here. Because if you go too far to one side towards the business, you'll create things that should deliver the value that they need, but if they don't land with the users won't use them, and that value won't be delivered. But if you swing too far the other way to exactly what the users need, but doesn't bring value to the company, then you're never going to bring enough value to the company for it to be worthwhile, and the business won't succeed. So it's all about getting a balance between those things that don't sit in the middle of that Venn diagram. I'm going to shift over quickly. Just briefly on this, actually, there's all these cards represent activities that you can do. They're aligned to these phases above. So discovery items here, experimentation items here, which is about ideation, prototyping, validating, and around shaping here. So here we're looking at what's the MVP, what's the roadmap, what are all those journeys that aren't part of the proof of concept happy paths, or the most unknowns. What do all those journeys look like, fleshing them out and ready for launch, and also setting up the analytics to measure. So all these activities don't need to be done. You can pick and choose depending on the product, but the process is what I want to talk about a bit more now. So if I come over here, here's a bit more detail. So the same framework of these three stages, and importantly these arrows here, you can jump backwards as well, so this isn't a linear process. You can jump forwards, jump backwards at any point, going backwards to any point. That's quite a critical thing to point out there. But if I go down here and see this represented as a bit more of a flow chart, I want to talk through this a bit more, especially around this collaboration row. So we can see this initial phase, strategy, or prep as it was called above. These ideas for what the product or what the team could focus on, there's going to be a lot of ideas floating around, and you want to capture those from everyone. You want the PM to lead on that, of course, but anyone should be able to submit an idea. But the tricky part is, after these opportunities have been submitted, how do you prioritize them? Now, one idea that I'll talk through just very briefly is to capture and agree with the stakeholders what the business needs. So in this example, we've got systemize incoming assets and data for an incoming asset portal, improve quality and completeness of data, track deliverables, and you can even throw in a column for estimated complexity if you want. For each idea, whether it's represented as a problem or an idea, solution idea, you can score that against its potential to deliver value against each of these. Add up those numbers, give it a score. So essentially what you end up with is a list of ideas or problems to solve and a score next to them. Now, you're obviously not committing at this early stage of what ideas to move forward with and what ideas to not move forward with, but it gives you an order in which you can go through and start discussing, start considering them. Everyone's on the same page as to why you're discussing one idea and not another idea first, and everyone's involved. So as we work through this, you can see that the PM is capturing these ideas with everyone, but the lead engineer, the lead researcher, the lead designer, they're all coming together to represent the team's needs, to make a decision around what they think is the most valuable projects, ideas to work on. The team can see that collaboration is important here. They're not cut out here, but the leads can come in and offer their opinions on what this order should be to get feedback from everyone. So if it's deemed the discovery is necessary, it's not always necessary, and if it is necessary, it doesn't need to be a 6-month, 2-year project. It can be very light, can be a week, a few days, it can be any length of time. If discovery is necessary, you're obviously creating those discovery tickets. The researcher and the PM should be heavily involved there, but anyone who wants to collaborate really, running the discovery with the whole team, anyone who wants to be involved, and then documenting those insights in a place that you can link to and share that with everyone. So again, the researcher is leading up on that, but everyone is involved. It's worth pointing out here, if your team doesn't have a researcher, that they're the person who wears the researcher hat is doing this. You don't need a dedicated researcher for this to work. So once that discovery is complete, or whether that's time bound or whether milestones have been met, sharing that knowledge out. So the PM is sharing that knowledge out, but also supported by the leads, the lead designer, lead researcher, lead engineer. So they know how to present this data best for who it's going to. They know their audience. They know what to pick out to make sure it's presented in the most useful way. At this stage, you'll want to decide, is it worth continuing from this discovery? Sometimes the answer is no, and you've saved a lot of time for your team, for your business. If the answer is yes, it feels like it's of value, then this is the time to create success metrics. The PM leads on this, but the whole team should be involved, and the stakeholders as well, ideally. You want to define what success means before you start picking out what ideas work best, because you don't want to be led by the ideas. You want to be led by the definition of success, regardless of the solution you pick. So here we see creating design tickets in the backlog. Obviously the designer is going to be leading on this, but they want to do this in collaboration with the PM. They're creating ideas, the whole team's doing that, led by the designer, prototyping, usability testing on this proof of concept, and then getting feedback. So you can see various people involved there. The whole team, the designer or the researcher is supporting, but it goes without saying that anyone who wants to be involved here should be able to be involved if they have the time. That feedback loop, very important. Like we were saying earlier, this isn't a linear process. This goes round a lot. Many cycles here. You could jump back from a further on stage and go back any number of steps. Whatever the outcome is, you go back to the point where you have a solid base of knowledge, and then you move back through the process that was disproved, whether that's a prototype or a bit of research. So coming through to delivery, this is the part that is underrepresented in the Double Diamond. So You've documented all your tests and your outcomes from the experimentation phase. You've done your prototypes. You've tested those with users. If it doesn't have an interface, maybe it's a process that you're designing here, or service design. You move through into delivery. So here's where you've got a proof of concept, but you've only got journeys through the happy paths, or maybe journeys through the least known path to prove the concept. Here's where you're going to start to flesh it out into an MVP, and then have a roadmap to further flesh that out into a growing product, assuming that the product performs. So here you're creating the design and engineering tickets. Obviously the lead design or the lead engineer leads on that, but collaboratively you want to be creating those. You don't want to take up too much time from each other, but you want the other involved to make sure they're being designed as unison. You're building one product here. You don't want to be creating these in a silo. So as a designer, you do the designing, and you test those as you go. You've already done usability testing on much of the proof of concept, but you want to continue to test those areas that you're now designing in more detail. You're also going to be sharing that with the team once you think that's done, once you think that design and testing with users is done, whether that's very light testing with users or whether it involves quite involved testing. You want to move on to sharing that with your team just to get their feedback. It might be that something works very well from a design point of view. From a practical point of view, it's very hard to implement, and that wasn't visible. That wasn't easy to see early on during the proof of concept. So once they've got their eyes on it, it could go forward, it could go back. Just like we were saying before, these things loop round. But assuming all is good, you've then got a candidate for user acceptance testing. That's something that's a bit more whole, more of a whole feature, a whole system that can be user accepted, tested. And here you're really hoping to only find technical issues. You might found more. That's fine. You can go back and consider those. Does the design need to change? But hopefully you're only finding technical issues here. So then we can move forwards and look at monitoring success metrics. You should be ready to launch by now, whether that is a feature or the MVP of a product. And remember, earlier on, we've already defined our success metrics. So this stage should really be around looking at those success metrics. How do we represent them as measurable items? Are the analytics set up? Is Google Analytics set up, or whatever platform you're using? Can it measure the things that we need measuring to answer those questions? And then you're set up to review that data coming in. So you might want to set up a dashboard for that. Now that is a full walkthrough showing the process and all of the collaboration throughout. I mean, I could talk about this for days, and I could go into detail on each section, but hopefully that's a good overview of the process I like to follow and the things I like to focus on whilst doing these various activities.